Thank you, everybody, for showing up. A huge group that we have here in the Civic Center here in Lone Tree. Also, an amazingly large group that we have out there on the Zoom audience. Again, I think, of course, it shows that Darren White, tonight's presenter, and that. Thank you, Darren, for putting together a presentation and coming out tonight. But it shows that whenever Darren presents, we get these really big groups. In fact, I've got 2 pages of people out there on the Zoom audience now. But yeah, 27. Probably close to 25 to 30 or something like that in house and that too. So I think this is definitely the largest group that I've seen, especially combined, maybe ever since I've been a member here since 2016. So once again, thank you everybody for coming out. As mentioned, we have Darren White tonight, who's going to be presenting on shooting techniques in the field and how to put them together back home. He's going to share again, how he gets his beautiful landscape images and composes them and so forth out in the field. And then I'll let him share, but he's got several different techniques that he's going to share with us as far as the post-processing part of it and how he gets his award-winning images put together in the end. A couple other things that we have coming up. We're getting close to the end of the year, right? This is the last presentation night. We've already wrapped up our competition night. Thank you for everybody who joined in the competitions throughout the year. We will have the awards ceremony and year-end elections at our December 6th meeting. So that's, I guess, in a couple weeks on Wednesday, the first Wednesday in December. And that one also is going to be, we'll have dinner. The Chick-fil-A, we're going to have Chick-fil-A brought in. So there'll be plenty of food there. But it also is a potluck, so that's the main entree will be Chick-fil-A. But encourage people to also bring in, whether it's side dishes, desserts, salads, and so forth.
There'll be a form that'll go out. Okay. They sign up for how many people they're going to come, and then they can sign up for what they want to bring.
Great. So again, December 6th, mark that on your calendar. It's always a fun event, and then we will also be doing the elections for the 2024 board. January, so now that's the end of the year. No more meetings in December. We usually take that break during the last few weeks, let everybody enjoy the holiday season, and then we kick it off on January 3rd is the first meeting where we'll have a exhibition night. I think many of us have done those exhibitions in that, but for those that haven't, it's a good opportunity to submit up to 4 images. We share them with the people who are here in person as well as the Zoom audience. And it gives you an opportunity. It's not a competition. You can share your images, describe the story behind the images, maybe a couple things as far as what you did as far as processing, and then we open it up to those who are here in attendance to weigh in, give suggestions, and again, it's always a real good learning experience. This last year we had some really good meetings on those exhibition nights and that. So look forward to those in 2024, first of which is on January 3rd. Other things that we have coming up in the first part of next year, January 17th is our first presentation night. That is with Cheryl Opperman, a nature and landscape photographer. I don't know what the topic is yet, but we'll follow up with the topic, but that'll be January 17th. And then February 7th, we have our first competition of the year, and that one will be open. February 21st, we have a presentation with one of our Lone Tree members, Paul Malinowski, and he's going to be covering photographing the sandhill crane migration. March 6th is another one of the exhibition nights that I described earlier. March 20th, we have Ben Evans, who's here tonight, another Lone Tree member, and he's going to be presenting on photographing hummingbirds. April 3rd, we have our next competition night, and that's the first themed night. And the themes are going to be subjects, emotion, and leading lines. So 2 different topics. You can pick either of those 2, but we will have that competition April 3rd. And then April 17th, we have a presentation, Elaine Graves, also here tonight, a Lone Tree member, and she's going to be presenting on lighting. Let's see. With that, I'm going to go ahead and I'll do an intro. Actually, what we'll do is go ahead and give the awards first, and then we'll introduce Darren and have him get started on the presentation. Let's see here. I'm going to start with beginner and intermediate color. So this is, again, is for the competition that we just had a couple of weeks ago. Darren was the judge for that. Thank you, Darren, for the commentary and the judging that night. These are the awards that were based on his, based upon that night. So let's see, beginner, intermediate color. I've got here the judges award went to Kathy Bala for Before Tourists Arrive. I don't think Kathy,
I think they're online.
She might be online. Congratulations, Kathy. First place, we have Jane Richards, Band and Sunset. Congratulations, Jane. We'll keep a stat going here for you. Second place, we have John Mumford with Cool Quiet Night. On here. We've got third place is Carolyn Ryman, Watchful Eye. Congratulations. And honorable mention, we have Carolyn Ryman with Northern Boardwalk. Okay, now we'll move on to the advanced color. Let's see here. We'll start with the Judges Award. The Judges Award was for Bruce Norman. What Big Claws You Have. Let's see. First place, we have Bruce Norman. Guess what? What Big Claws You Have. Second place, John McCluskey with Milky Way from Chimney Rock Trail. Third place, Terry Verbickus. She's here tonight. Autumn Sunset in the San Juans. Congratulations, Terry. And honorable mention was Michael Rhino, myself, with Cold Duck. Let's see. Let's go to beginner in your intermediate monochrome. Judges Award is Bruce Ryman with Topsy Turvy. First place, Jane Richards, Weathering the Waves. Put them all together. We'll go sort them out. Okay, we'll do that. All right. Let's see. Second place, Bruce Ryman with Topsy Turvy. Oh, there you go. Put her name on all those. All right. Let's see. On to third place, Jane Richards with Cocoa River Lighthouse Drama. And honorable mention, Bruce Ryman, Against the Storm. Yeah. So the final category is the advanced monochrome final category. Judges Award goes to Dave Purcell, Tunnel Vision. First place, Dave Purcell, Tunnel Vision, same image. Second place is Carino Zaragoza. I think the road is this way. And third place, Michael Rhino, myself with Rise Above. And honorable mention, Terry Verbickus, Dose of Winter's Frosting. So congratulations, everybody. And also thanks to everybody who participated. We had yeah, those are the ones. And these are the ones that they're not here. So again, thank you for everybody that competed, not just in that last competition, but all the competitions throughout the year. And again, we're looking forward to those coming up next year. Now on to, again, tonight's presenter. We have Darren White. A little bit of background on Darren. He's been a photographer for 35 years, freelance photographer for 25 of those, and full-time self-employed photographer for these past 11 years. Nationally published with clients including Microsoft, Craft Brewery Alliance, I should say, Samsung, and more. I know a couple of years ago, he had the cover image on Landscape Photography magazine and a full article in their black and white issue that year. So we shared that, I think shortly after that one came out here at in the building. He's been teaching workshops for over 15 years. In the past 10 locations, including Yellowstone, Arches, Grand Tetons, and the Oregon coast. So a lot of night photography workshops as well as landscape photography workshops. Many of us have benefited by being on those. I know I was at his Oregon coast workshop right before COVID hit and had a great time out there. I think Crystal is here in the building also. She was on that same trip and enjoyed it quite a bit also. He also has relationships and sponsorships with Sigma Lenses, Moab Fine Art Papers, Robust Tripods, and various calendar companies. And his goal is to help others improve and succeed in their craft. And I know he's presented here several times to our Lone Tree Club, and I know every time there's a lot of things that myself and others have picked up. And just speaking from experience, I know I've learned quite a bit from Darren over the years, and much appreciated for the fact that he has that goal of helping others learn. So with that, I don't know if anybody has any questions. If not, we'll go ahead and move on to Darren and let him start his presentation.
Okay, I'll share my screen. All right, well, welcome everybody. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces and some new ones. Thanks for the introduction, Michael. I appreciate it. As Michael said, my goal is to help others succeed in photography. And there's a lot of times I've been doing this for many years, and I've helped teach probably close to 600 people throughout those years. And I get asked a lot of questions. We see a lot of things in the field that most people don't think of before they go out into the field. And so my goal is to make sure that when you guys are out there, you're doing all that you can to get the best images possible. And that could be everything from the type of tripod you have to the way you're shooting a specific scene. So I've actually shot with quite a few people in this room. A lot of you have seen the mistakes that I've made. And so a lot of the things, excuse me, that I'm going to talk about are because if I talk about a mistake or something that goes wrong, it's because I've made it myself. So with that, I'm kind of going to get started. This is going to be a presentation on infield shooting techniques and how to assemble them. And when I say assemble them, that means that there's generally going to be more than one image. So most of the time when I'm out in the field shooting, I'm not just setting up, taking a picture and be like, oh, that's good, got it, and I'm done. There's a little bit more that goes into it, and those are the things I'm going to show you guys today. I'm Darren. Like Michael said, I've worked with clients all over the world. The biggest one that I've worked with is Samsung. I did a image for them, and they used it, like if you walked into Best Buy, you would probably see it on their TVs. It was in all the ads on B&H and all their online advertising. They had that image for 3 years exclusively. I was not even allowed to sell it for 3 years. So that was kind of neat. That was it's one of those things that you get the email and you think, oh, this is a scam. But you hesitantly reply to it, and 2 days later, there's a check in the mail because they need the image yesterday. So it was one of those things. It's pretty cool. So I'm kind of proud about that. I started my journey with film back in 1987. So learning on film in dark rooms, I learned how to take images, get them good in the camera. When I switched to digital, that was a little bit different. That was another learning curve. And I do practice the work smarter, not harder. If you see me in the field and I'm fumbling around, it's because I'm probably trying to do something that I shouldn't be. But back home, when I'm processing images, my goal is to do it in the quickest amount of time with the best results. And I'm going to show you guys some of that today. You can find me online. The top one is just my website, darrenwhitephotography.com. I have a new website, letschaselight.com. That's where I sell all my fine art canvases, and I do my blog and my workshops out of that. The blog is very informative. It's my goal through the blog is, again, to help people learn about photography and better themselves. I'm on Facebook, I'm on Instagram, and then I have an email address. So pretty standard there. We talked about the companies that I work with. I was a Sigma ambassador for 4 years. I do unofficial work for them now. I still have a great relationship with them. I work with Robust Support Tribe. Again, Moab Fine Art Papers, and then I host one of my workshops in Oregon out of the Open Fine Spot in Yamaha, Oregon. All right, overcoming the limitations of our cameras to create better images. A lot of the limitations are depth of field, shooting land. The sharp all the way through. Generally, landscapes aren't artistic in the terms of we want to have a lot of blur in one part of the image or another part of the image. Generally, our goal is to take good, sharp images from front to back, side to side. Dynamic range is kind of a touchy subject, but a lot of the newer cameras now have good dynamic range. But in my opinion and through my experience, I find, again, anytime you have to continually boost your shadows up, you're going to induce noise or artifacts that you really don't want. And then noise, and I'm going to, if we get to the night photography part about it, I'm going to discuss some stuff with you there. And I think we will, because this is going to be a fairly short presentation with demos at the end. If you have questions along the way, you can ask them. I don't care. I'd rather take the questions, answer them, and then move on instead of having you forget about them. So let's just get this out of the way right now. Sky replacements. I mean, it's a touchy subject. We've been talking about it here in the photo club. I just did a presentation for another photo club last week. It's a discussion there. It's, you know, it's an ethics question. Is it right? Is it wrong? My theory is this: if you take the sky picture and you take the foreground picture, blend them together. I don't care, because that's your art. Just don't do it like the image on the left, where you have the sun coming from one direction and the shadows go in the other direction. Make it look nice and natural. I take, like, this sky was not even anywhere near where I shot this image. I was a perfectly clear blue sky. But on sky pictures, and then you can find the ones that work well with your foregrounds. If I can't tell that you replaced the sky, you did a good job. And if your friends can't tell, you did a good job. But if they look at something like that on the left, it's like, wait a minute, the sun's going this way and the shadows are going this way. That's not right. So try to keep it subtle. Keep it natural, keep it simple. This is a sky replacement. I don't think anybody would know the difference if I didn't tell you. I have a little bit of, it's hard to see here, but there's some depth back in here where there's another cloud like coming down like it's raining. But yeah, just try to keep it simple and subtle. All right. So most of the time when we're out shooting, we're setting up and we're looking for the shot, whatever that may be. And ideally, we want to get a great histogram, something that looks similar to that, maybe less contrasty, more of a bell curve, but this is probably one of the better examples that I have. One thing to keep in mind is if I'm shooting next to Bruce and Bruce is shooting next to Tony, and we all got our cameras set up and we're comparing histograms and we get that perfect histogram, that's as good as you're going to get it. Doesn't matter what else you do. Your raw file is only going to look so good. And that's where the post-processing part comes in. That's where your artistic creativity comes into play. Because people say, oh, well, he takes better pictures than he does. Well, that's not necessarily true. Maybe in composition and the time of day, but my raw files aren't any better than your raw files or Bruce's raw files or Jane's or anybody else's. We all pretty much have the same starting point. We all pretty much know that you don't want to blow out your highlights and you don't want to clip your shadows. And if you can do that, then you'll have a lot of dynamic range to work with. So we strive for a histogram that looks similar to this. So the single image, but this is generally the type of image we get. Generally, as landscape photographers, we're not shooting on perfectly clear overcast days, or we're not shooting on you know, low contrast days. We're generally shooting when the light is more dramatic in the mornings or in the evenings. Generally, the light's coming in from one side and we got darks and we got shadows and we got highlights. So generally, this is probably what most of our histograms are going to look like as single images. So for single images, if you're just going to take one image, you know, you want to have good even lighting. You want to make sure that it's a low contrast scene. Overcast days are perfect for that. Overcast days are perfect for shooting foregrounds if you have a sky that you want to put into it. If you want no harsh shadows or no super directional light, overcast days, a nice flat light is perfect for that. And unless you have multiple light sources that are filling in your shadows, generally single exposures aren't going to be the best. This particular image was shot early in the morning before the sun came up, so the light was being filtered really nicely from below the horizon, and so there were no harsh shadows or anything like that. All right, we're going to jump into blending. So blending is a good way to keep your noise down because you're not boosting your shadows. You're going to get better dynamic range. You're going to get more details in your highlights. You're going to get a cleaner image if you go to print it. And we're going to talk about these. And then what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go through some demos. So you're actually going to see me put together images and explain the process rather than me just tell you, oh, do this and this. I'm actually going to show you. I think I have 6 demos to do. So this is a blended image. It's an image for the water, another image for the rocks, and then one image for the sky. But this is a real scene, just as I shot it. All right, simple blending. So one of my biggest pet peeves is when I look at a reflection image and the sky is darker than the water. And that's scientifically impossible to happen because water will absorb light, and so the sky is always going to be brighter than your reflection. So generally, what I'll do is I'll take one image for the sky, one image for the reflection. So the image that's in the middle is actually the original raw image that I took, and then I took another one at a darker exposure for the sky. I should have switched those two around. And then I blended them together so that the sky and the foreground balance each other. Now you're probably looking, well, how did you blend them together when you got the trees in there? This takes me like literally 15 seconds to do, and I'm going to show you guys that. But even here, you can see that the water is darker than the sky, and that's just how it is. So when you see people that got these super dark skies and these bright reflection shots, it's impossible. Blending motion. So this is something that I like to do along the Oregon coast or anytime that there's water. Is you can see the 2 images on the left. You got a splash coming, and then you got the water coming over the rock there in the foreground, but then you also got water in the back. So I blend those 2 together, and I use the same technique that I'm going to show you on the first image, and it works really well. Another way to use it is if you're shooting waterfalls, and let's say it's windy out, you shoot your waterfall, the water at one exposure, and then you shoot your the surrounding area at a slightly faster shutter speed to make sure that the foliage is all nice and sharp, and then you can blend those together too. So that's a great way to use it as well. So those are the 2 blending modes, and when we talk about blends, I'm going to show you guys those. So HDR, let's talk about HDR for just a second. When HDR first came about, there was a lot of bad talk about it. Oh, it looks cartoonish, it looks fake, oh, it's all flat, there's no shadows, there's no highlights, all this kind of stuff. But so HDR has kind of had a bad rap, but with the new processing in Photoshop and Lightroom and Adobe Camera Raw, you can actually get super natural looking images now that nobody would ever know if they're been blended or not, and I'm going to show you guys that. When you're dealing with subjects that are affected by harsh light and they aren't moving, you can use your camera to bracket and then create HDR images. HDR is basically high dynamic range for anybody that doesn't know. Years ago, HDR was cartoonish looking images that were unrealistic. Now we can use this technique to overcome the dynamic range limitations of our cameras. With newer software, we can get very neutral and natural looking images with high dynamic range that most people would never know. And so this is an example of the 9 images that I shot, and then once I put it together, this is the outcome. So I got all my sun rays, I got the light hitting the grasses in the foreground, I got the shadow from the trees, a good shadow detail there, and it looks like it did when I was standing there taking the pictures. But because I was using the camera, the sensor picks it up differently than my eyes do. Our eyes literally are the best sensor in the world with the most dynamic range. So 9 images captured, all the good data from the highlights to the shadows. And then in the finished image, there's no black blacks and there's no white whites. And we're going to put this image together and I'll show you. Bracketing will let you have many more options to choose from when you get home. When you bracket images to create HDR files, you really take the guesswork out of the initial stages of processing. If you have one image and it's either overexposed or underexposed, you're going to have a lot of work to do. If you are using bracketing, whether you're creating the HDR images or not, the bracketing itself will take a lot of the guesswork out of where you start your processing, because you'll be able to look at those 7 or 9 images and you'll be able to say, okay, this is the best one. And that takes the guesswork out of trying to do it in the field. Your HDR files have a lot more dynamic range that you don't have to always boost up your shadows. And you, again, by not doing that, you're going to get cleaner images for print. Focus stacking. So this is one that I've really taken a liking to over the last couple of years. I've been doing it with macro images like this. This is probably maybe 1.5 inches by 1.5 inches. And this is probably 30 or 40 images stacked. But we're not going to talk about macro with that. We're going to talk about focus stacking with landscape images. So focus stacking gives us edge-to-edge sharpness, detail throughout the image. It's good for macro landscapes or any type of photography where the subject is stationary. I'm actually going to show you a focus stacking technique where there's moving stuff in the image. And it's not good for anything moving or changing positions in the scene. What I'm going to show you is a small area that we can fix. And so that's why I'm going to use this as an example. So I think, yeah. So focus stacking is commonly used in macro photography, but it can also be used in landscape work too. Some photographers like to use what's called hyperfocal technique. And from Wikipedia, in optics photography, hyperfocal distance is the distance beyond which all objects can be brought into acceptable focus. As hyperfocal distance is the focus distance giving the maximum depth of field, it is the most desirable distance to set your focus to. So depending on your level of acceptable, maybe focus stacking is for you, maybe it's not for you. If you're okay with shooting at f/22 and having a little bit of softness in your image, but more depth of field, you know, that's your choice. But if you want good tack sharp images from front to back, you're going to want to focus stack. Because when somebody calls you up and says, hey, Joe, I need a 30 by 40 print of that shot from North Carolina that you have. And you're like, great, I shot that at f/22, 1 second exposure, looks good. But then when you blow it up, f/22 is not that sharp. The light diffracts, and there's artifacts and things that don't look right in large prints. So it's just something to think about and consider. So here we can see that this is a single image, and I focused on this image right in here in these rocks. This is in the middle portion. And then you can see the difference in the final focus stacked image. And there's a big difference. And here's a closer up showing you the original image on the right and the focus stacked image on the left. I think it's pretty clear. You guys can see the difference. This is the top portion, focus stacked on the left, single image on the right. And then the middle part, pretty easy to see. So focus stacking doesn't take a lot of time in the field, especially once you do it a couple times, you get the hang of it. It takes a little bit of time back home, but it's definitely worth it. Depending on what your level of sharpness is, depending on what level of sharpness you find acceptable, focus stacking may or may not be for you. Focus stacking is good when you're super close to your foreground and you want detail throughout. So if I'm up close to the flower like I am here, I'm not going to be able to get the mountains in focus even if I shoot it at f/22. And if I shoot it at f/22 and there's any wind, I'm probably going to be down to at least 1/4 of a second, and that's going to move, and that's going to screw that up. So by using a higher shutter speed, I can make faster exposures, get everything sharp by taking 7 or 8 images, put them together, and I've just eliminated a problem. So how do you shoot for focus stacking? Camera on tripod, compose with room to crop. So every lens has what's called focus breathing. So even if you're shooting a 35mm prime and I'm focused on this, and then I change my focus to focus on the wall back there, even though my lens and camera are in the same spot, it's going to go from 35mm to maybe 33.5mm or something like that. There's a little bit of focus breathing in the lens, in all lenses. I don't know of any lens that doesn't have it. So whenever you change your focal point, you're changing your focal length a tiny amount. So when you do put these images together, there's going to be a little border around the edge that's not going to be quite perfect. So that's why we want to compose with room to crop. Don't frame it exactly as you want. Give yourself some room. So we just talked about focus breathing. Generally, you want to choose the sharpest f-stop, and that's about 2 stops up from the widest. So if you're shooting a 2.8, you want to shoot in the 5.6 range, somewhere around there. I highly recommend you do not use f/16, f/22 to focus stack. There are people out there who say that if you use f/16, then instead of shooting 8 images, you only have to shoot 3 or 4 images. I find that that is a case for a potential disaster when you get home. So a little bit wider aperture, faster shutter speed to freeze any movement that may be in there, because that's the whole point of focus stacking, is you're trying to get the sharpest image possible. So we just talked about that. Make sure you shoot a black frame before you start your stack. This will help eliminate any issues when putting the images together back home. So if any of you have been on any of my workshops, we always shoot sequences of some sort. You all know that before we start a sequence, we want to take a black frame, shoot the sequence, take another black frame. And when you get home and you're looking at 5,000 images on your screen and you see 2 black frames, you know that those 15 or 20 images in between those 2 black frames, you're going to do something with those. Those are the good images. So you're not including your test shots that are before it. Once you start including test shots that are slightly off composition, or you've made an adjustment to your camera, or maybe these are at 1/4 of a second, but your test shots are at like 1/2 a second, you're going to have problems. Bookends will eliminate all your problems when it comes to processing your images at home. Take as many shots as you need to cover all the areas of the image. So this is a big one, and this is one that I even struggle with too. Depending on your scene, you want to make sure that your focal points cover all the images, or cover all the points of the image. And if let's say you're just having a rough day, or you're not thinking, and you do this side and you do the middle and you don't do the left side, you get home and you look and it's like, oh, this is all focused, and then you got this side that's not. So you really want to make sure that where you touch your camera, if you have a touch screen or move your focal point, that you do all around the image. And I'm going to show you that in just a second. All right, so here's an example of how I focus stack these images, and we're actually going to demo the one on the left. So the one on the left, I just did a grid, like a tic-tac-toe grid, and then I did one for the rock, and then I did one for the very top of the tree. The one for the very top of the tree covers the rock in the very back because it's far enough away. The ice here in the foreground, I did all across the bottom here, and then I followed this line all the way up. Another one over here, a few more over here, another one for this middle ground where the white ice is, and then another one for the top of the mountain there. Put them all together. The one for the top of the mountain covers the clouds. You don't need to focus on the clouds, but you just want to make sure you have all your points covered. And this is an example of 36 images at f8, 105 millimeter macro, 1/6 of a second at ISO 50. I wish I could show you guys the detail of this. I could print this as large as the wall and it would be tack sharp. And this has a lot of depth. When you're talking about macro images or where you're really close to your subject, you have really shallow depth of field. And so I had to focus on the point of the muscles that was the closest to me. And then I also had to focus on these black parts down in here because they're about an inch deeper into the image, and to make sure that I got those in focus too. And I learned from my mistakes because I was here at the same spot a few months earlier and I tried this exact same thing. And when I got home, all the points out by me were in focus, but all the shadow detail and the points that were actually sticking to the rock, they weren't in focus. So then I realized I got to focus on the points that are sticking out towards me, and I got to focus on the inside. So the closer you are to your subject, you got to make sure to get all the depths focused on. All right. So here's some night photography. The image on the left, obviously a single image. The middle is 16 images stacked, and the one on the right is 53 images. And I think that there's a considerable difference that you can see visually with your eye between the 16 and the 53. I try to be nice about this. There's, I've probably taught more people night photography than landscape photography, and in the course of the 15 years or whatever. But a lot of people are really happy with the single image. And I hear well, I just take a single image because that's what's real. That's what, I don't need to get all stack and do all this artsy stuff. But let me ask you this. When you're out at night and you're looking at the stars, or you're looking at, most of us have been to the Abbott Church, does your eye see noise when you're looking? You don't see noise in the vision that you get when you're looking at the stars, do you? So why would you want that in your images? The noise is simply a limitation of our camera sensors. We can remove that noise to make the scene look as natural as possible. And so that's what we're trying to do. Some people are happy with the single image. Some people say, well, I don't want to spend a lot of time on it. I'll just take 16 images. That's fine. I'm probably going to go more of the 50 to 100 images. Theoretically, the more images you take, the more good data you're going to collect. When you combine that good data, it eliminates the noise. It's like this. If you have an apple pie, think of an apple pie top and it's got holes in it. Then you put another apple pie on top of it, but you turn it just a little bit. So now the holes get smaller. And then you put another apple pie on top of it and you turn it just a little bit, and now the holes get even smaller. You keep doing that until eventually the holes close up, and then your noise is gone. So in theory, the way that we calculate noise reduction based on the number of images that we're going to take is by the square root. So if you take 25 images, you should get a 5 times noise reduction in your final image. If you take 36 images, you should get a 6 times noise reduction. There's a limitation to the software though, and I know the developer, and I've talked to him, and he says after you go to 36 images, to really get any more benefit, you have to go to 72. And after 72, then you have to go to 144. So I've went all the way up to 235, and I believe I have that image, and I'll show it to you. But the more good data you can collect, the better you're going to be. So why do we stack? It's easy to do. You've already dialed in your exposure. You've already dialed in your composition. All you have to do is let the camera run back-to-back images. It doesn't take up much time. Generally, I can get a stack done in about 10 to 15 minutes. The benefits are well worth my time in the field. You get cleaner images for print. You can print larger, and you have minimal to no noise. There's nothing worse than thinking you have this great image and you go to print it 30 by 40 or whatever, and it's just, you got magenta sensor noise in the bottom, or you got horrible noise in your building or whatever it is that your subject you're shooting. And sure, it looks good on Instagram and social media, but if you're going to print it, it's probably not going to look very good. So stacking will always give you the best results. And I'm going to show you that. So how do we stack? I want to make sure I did. Okay. So how do we stack? We compose, we focus, and we dial in our exposure. If we're stacking, generally what I'll do is, instead of shooting at 6400 ISO, generally what I'll do is I will shoot at a little bit higher ISO, because I know that the stacking is going to eliminate the noise. So I can generally shoot at faster shutter speeds, get my stars more pinpoint, because I'm not worried about the noise. For stacking, it's okay to use a slightly higher ISO. I just talked about that. Take a black frame. A lot of the times we're out there in the dark and we're shooting and we're adjusting shutter speeds and we're adjusting our ISOs and we're getting our composition okay. And you don't want those 6 images to be in with the stacked images, because the program will fail every time. You want to take a black frame once you get everything dialed in, take your sequence, and then take another black frame. I like to use a simple cable release. If you are super familiar with the intervalometer in the back of your camera, go ahead and use that. But I've seen more sequences and images screwed up by people that don't know how to use that proficiently. So I recommend a simple cable release to just press and lock and let the camera and it do its own thing. Figure out the time by multiplying the number of images you want by the exposure. So if you have 50 images and they're 15 seconds each, that'd give me 13 minutes. I set the timer on my phone for 13 minutes, and when it goes off, I'm done. You don't have to have exactly 36 images or exactly 25 images. You're going to get a benefit of the noise reduction, anything over 9, but more is better. If I'm on a Mac, I'm going to run it on the Starry Landscape Stacker. And if I'm on a Windows machine, I'm going to run it on Sequator. Each one of those programs only works on its own machine. So Starry Landscape Stacker is only for Macs, and Sequator is only for Windows. So you either have one or the other. What's that? Spell it. Sequator. It's like equator with an S. Yeah, Sequator. Sequator. Okay, focus stacking, blending, and stacking the stars. So this is where I like to say the magic really happens. We've learned how to focus stack our foregrounds, and we've learned how to stack images for the night sky to eliminate the noise. By stacking the foreground, we get amazing depth of field, and then we can blend the two together. And I'm going to show you guys this. So it's what I call creating the ultimate night scene image. You shoot your foreground at sunrise or sunset, focus stack it if you need to. Move to an area where you can get just a good clean shot of the night sky. Shoot a stack of images just for the night sky. So it's easier to shoot your foreground as one image or one set of images, and then move your camera away from the foreground so that you just get a clean image of the night sky. If you were to leave your camera sitting right here and you shoot this for your foreground, and then you shoot this exact same image again for the sky, it's going to be way harder to blend. It just is. So I like to have a good clean sky. So I just move my camera to the side of the house, shoot the sky, and then blend the two together. And in fact, the image I'm going to show you, I was with Chuck the night that I took it, and that's exactly what we did. We shot the rocks, and then we moved to a location where we had just the clear sky, shot it, and then we blend them together. Yeah, so once you're home, combine the focus stacked images and the foreground images that you did. Get the one good, perfectly sharp image, mask out the sky, stack your night sky image, and get your one good night sky image with no noise. And then you're going to copy that image onto the foreground image, and then work on each layer to blend the tones seamlessly. And that's what I'm going to show you as well. If you look at a lot of images, you can see these, especially here in Colorado, you see these super white mountains, and then you see these dark skies. It's like, all right, you cut this out and you pasted it in here. It doesn't look natural at all. But I'm going to show you guys how to make those natural. Okay, so that's it as far as the talking part of it. Now we're going to do some demo. And I just want to talk a little bit about this. This is a sequence that I did in Iowa. And hopefully that you can see it. But in image 1, I arrived at the scene. This is the exact scene that I arrived at. And I was excited, and I got out and I started shooting. After about 3 or 4 shots, I'm like, well, there's a light behind me. And I look, and just to the lower left of the house, or the old school building, you can see my shadow. Well, that wasn't going to work because I wasn't going to go down and tell the farmer to turn his light out. So I'm like, okay, that's good enough. So I took a sequence of the ones and I put them together, and I get the stacked sky for number 2. That's the stacked image. The next day, I went back because it was an overcast day, and I shot the schoolhouse again. And then I took the night sky from number 2, and I put it with the foreground image of number 3, so that I could recreate the scene without any shadows or any other distracting lights on the horizon. So that's a little bit about how I do some of my night photography. Okay, you guys want to see how these are done? All right. Does anybody have any questions? No?
Do you use, do you like to use in-camera focus stacking, or do you manually focus stack?
I do not use the in-camera focus stacking. I like to pick and choose my focus points. My understanding on the in-camera is that it moves the sensor, or it moves something to adjust the focal plane of the camera. But to be honest, I've never spent a lot of time trying it, so I'm not sure. But I know that in specific images, and we're gonna do that on the rock image. I like to pick exactly where I'm focusing, just so that, excuse me, that I feel better about the images when I get home. Kind of take the guesswork out. So,
Real quick, there's a question on the
sure.
chat here real quick. It says, what software do you use for combining focus stacking?
Photoshop.
Okay.
Yeah. It used to be that you had something called Helicon Focus, and let's see, Photomatics was for HDR. But yeah, Helicon Focus. I think if you're going to do, if you're doing like bugs heads, you know, super macro type stuff, I think Helicon Focus is still the best one. But for landscapes, Photoshop's come a long way, so it works really well, and you'll see that. So we are going to demo basic blends, the motion blends. We're going to focus stack. Then we're going to do the HDR. Then we're going to do the night sky stack. And then we're going to do the focus stack blend at the end. And we've got plenty of time, so this is good. Is there any other questions before I get started on this? Because it's not going to take me an hour to do this.
Darren, when you're doing that, when you're doing your focus stacking and you're picking your focus spots, you just do them at random? Left first and
Right.
I don't have a specific, it all depends on the scene, so to speak. Each scene is different, and I look at the elements in the scene and make sure that I focus on each of the important elements. Because a lot of the times you'll have, even if you have a scene like this, and you got your computer here, but you got something back here, you know, I need to make sure that I focus here and here. The focus points are very crucial to make sure that you get everything in focus. Each focal plane needs to be in focus. Like that muscle shot that I showed you, the first time I did it, I only got the muscles in focus. I didn't get where their bodies, where they go back and attach to the rocks, because I didn't focus back in those shadows. The second time I did, And so everything came into focus.
How are you thinking? Tapping on the back of
Yeah, so on my camera, I have two cameras. I have a A7R4 Sony, and I have a Nikon D850, and both of them have touch screens, so I can just touch, it focuses and shoots. But on my D850, I like to actually move. It has a little joystick on it, and I like to actually use that to move it. So either way works as long as you make sure that you get all the images or all the focus points. Okay, so that's that. So I'm going to close out of this, and I'm going to go to, so I use Adobe Camera Raw. I know I'm probably a minority. I'm not a fan of Lightroom, but they do the same thing. So here we go. So here's the two images, and I'm just going to select both of them. All right, so I'm going to select both. I'm going to get rid of this too. Okay, so I got to select both images. I'm going to go to Tools, Photoshop, and load images into Photoshop layers. So in Lightroom, it's edit in Photoshop layers, I believe. So it loads them into Photoshop layers. And what I'm going to do is I believe it's going to load them backwards. And what I like to do is I like to have the lighter image on top and the darker image on the bottom.
You don't do any processing of the image before you.
Not yet, because, so that's a good question, Tony. The reason is because I want to start my processing with the best image possible. So I'm going to put these together. That's going to give me my best starting point. So I'm just going to move this up on top. So now I got my reflection image on the top, and I'm going to blend in the sky from the bottom image here. So I'm not going to look at that screen. I'll just look at mine. So we have this tree here, but you can see that we have really good shadow detail in here. It's brighter on my screen, but you can see. Anyway, so what we're going to do is we're going to blend in the sky. So even though we have the tree here, the best way to do this is just put a mask on this top layer. Grab our brush tool. Make sure that we're on the black. We want a fairly big brush. And we want to make sure that our opacity is somewhere in the 50 to 60 range. Doesn't matter. Doesn't have to be perfect. We want a low opacity to start with. And by low, I mean not 100%. And then all we're going to do is we're just going to go over this and blend this in. So there's one pass. It looks a little bit light, so I'm actually going to do it one more time at a slightly lower opacity. And so there's what I would start with. And now you can see, I'll zoom in here. If I toggle so you can see the shadow detail that's still in the background there. And that's what I really want to keep, but I also want to make sure that the sky is blended in well so that it matches or is very close to the reflection. So for reflection shots, this is how I blend images. Any questions on that? No, if there was wind, I would have just shot this at a faster shutter speed. Because I want to make sure that these are this tree is actually bigger than what it looks like. So if there was wind, it probably wouldn't be blowing that much anyway. These littler ones over here on the left probably would have been. All right. So now we're going to open up the ones with the ocean. And again, same thing. Just select both images. Tools, Photoshop, load layers into Photoshop load images into Photoshop layers. If you're not comfortable using layers and masks in Photoshop, it's something I'll highly recommend that you take upon yourself to learn and use and understand. They're very simple and they're very powerful. And I'm showing you how powerful they are, but also how simple they are, because I'm doing very simple blends. I'm not actually masking anything out yet. I'm just showing you how to blend one image onto another image to create a final scene. So in this image here, we got a good wave coming over this rock here. We got the splash coming up over this rock. But then in the bottom image, we have that splash actually coming over the rock in the foreground. So what I want to do is I want to fill in this empty area here with this. So again, all I do is I don't have to make a selection. I don't have to do anything. I just want to put a mask on it, which is this right here. And it puts a mask on it. I don't need the dog. And then I want to grab my brush. Again, this can be a fairly big brush, or it could be a smaller brush in this case, but I want to be on the black. Black subtracts. And then I want to make this close to 100% on this one, because I actually want to fill this all in. So I'm going to make my brush just a little bit smaller. And now I'm just going to paint this in. And I'm trying to be careful because I want to include the big splash that's in the background there. If I go up in here, then it goes away. And that's not really what I want to do. I want to kind of fill this in a little bit here. That looks pretty good. Now I'm thinking, oh God, my splash went away. What am I going to do? Well, if we use black to subtract, we can use white to bring it back. Like that. So now we got all three elements. We got the wave going over the rock on the left, the water coming over the rock on the middle there on the right, the splash coming up, and we got the good motion here in the foreground. And then with that, I would just flatten this image, and then I would start my processing.
Do you auto-align those at times?
Good question, Jane. Yeah, I should have done that previously, and it's just something I overthought, but because I know that these two images will line up.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, so let me go back and do that. I'm going to remove this mask. Okay, so here's my two images. So in order to auto align, like what Jane's saying, you select both images, and by selecting both images, I just shift and click and hold. If one's selected, shift click, or you can command click if it's two. A lot of the times I'll have multiple layers, and so then it's just shift on and click on the bottom one, and it selects all of them. So then what I would do is I would come up here to edit and auto align and just leave everything on auto. I don't have the vignette or the geometric distortion checked. And then it aligns it. So now what I can do is I like to zoom in, and then I just want to make sure that the edge of that rock doesn't move, and it doesn't. Everything's the same. So now I know when I blend, I'm not going to get any weird halos. I've done this image so many times that I know that already, but thanks for asking. That's a good point for people that might not know. So that's what we like to call building an image, where you have several things that are happening in different positions of the image, but your camera never moves, and you might want to capture all of those. And so this is a great example, especially at the beach, when you have waves in multiple positions. You can do things like this to create more dramatic images. Any questions on that? Okay. So this next one, the HDR, is the one that we talked about a little bit, but I'm going to show you guys. So what I would do is I would select all the images, And I have this one down here that's already done and ready to go because the HDR does take a little bit of time. So I've got all the images selected. And what I want to do is I just double click or right click and then open in Camera Raw. And you can see here that I have my highlights turned on so that you can see these are all the blown highlights here. And what I want to do is I just want to come up here to edit, select all. And then what I would do is I would click on the three dots and then go to merge to HDR. And then what it's going to do is it's going to auto align and it's going to put all the good data together as one image. But because that takes a little bit of time, I'm not actually going to do that, even though we have time. But I do want to show you this. So I'm going to grab just this image here. I'm going to open it in Camera Raw. So if we go over here to our light and we go to exposure, you can see that we only get 5 stops of dynamic range with a single image. So I've already put this image together. So I'm going to go down here and I'm going to grab it. And I want to make sure that, yeah. So I had made some adjustments. But anyway, so here is the image that's been put together. And it looks very similar to the previous one. However, this one now has 10 stops of dynamic range if you need it. So literally, we've doubled the amount of information that we could potentially have. So obviously, we don't need that much. But what I want to show you is once we have the HDR high dynamic range image put together, we can bring back these highlights a little bit. We can bring up the exposure a little bit. Now you'll notice we haven't touched the shadows at all yet. That's all good data already. So now, if we're looking at our histogram, we don't have anything that's blown out and we don't have anything that's clipped. So we don't have any black blacks and we don't have any white whites, which is what we want. And then now from here, I would just start my processing and I would, color adjustment, maybe a little bit of contrast, things like that. But now we have an image that is going to be super clean, super natural looking. We haven't had to boost up any shadows to potentially bring up any noise. We've got amazing detail throughout. There's even detail back in here, where before that would have been pure black. We got the light rays coming through. So this is just a great example of how using multiple images to collect more good data is a better way of doing things than trying to extract good data from a bad raw file. Are there any questions on that? It's all pretty straightforward. Okay, so now let's get into the focus stacking. All right, so here are the images, and you saw where I focused. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select all of these. Okay, I am going to load these into Photoshop layers. And I have resized these images a little bit so they're not the full size images, just so it'll go a little bit quicker. This is about the last year for this computer, so. Okay, once they're all loaded up, I'm going to move this up here. So once they're, yep, I'm going to do that right now. So once I have them all loaded, the first one selected, and I scroll down, shift click on the last one to select them all. And then what Carolyn just said, I'm going to go over here to edit and auto align. And again, I just use the auto. I don't use vignette control or geometric distortion. Click OK. And it analyzes all the points of interest. Yeah, on my computer with the HDR, it takes a lot, especially in that one scene because there's a lot of stuff in it. But yeah, I did use smaller images on this, so hopefully it'll go a little bit faster. But yeah, I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody has any real quick about anything.
Yeah. And when you're choosing your points, are you always going horizontally as well as vertically?
Well, I want to. The idea with that is that I want to make sure that I get all the from front to back and side to side. So it doesn't really matter how I choose or what pattern I decide on. It's like I see rocks here in the foreground, so I want to make sure that I get each one of those rocks in focus, and then some of the smaller rocks that are just above that, and then kind of keep working my way up to the very top of that tree. And then I start working on this one. I started working my way on the sides because I want to make sure that the rocks on the sides were in focus and all that. But it doesn't really matter what pattern you choose as long as you make sure that you get everything in focus, or you get an image for each element of the whole image.
Well, this one too here, Darren, like the ones you did with the little clams, you get into crevices too, focus on all the crevices there.
Yep. And this one's not as crucial because I'm a little bit further away. With the ones with the mussels, I was, literally 9-10 inches away from it. So I had to be really sure because your depth of field is so shallow with a macro lens.
We have one question. Do you have any tricks for focus stack when there are small features near and far that are beyond the depth of focus for any individual image, or are you supposed to use a smaller aperture? I think what they're saying is you just want to focus on the closest point, far near midway, halfway.
Yeah, so like I wouldn't stick my camera a half an inch away from a patch of grass and expect that to be in focus, because that's beyond the limitation of the camera lens itself. It doesn't have whether you focus stack or not, that lens can't focus that close, right? So I always want to make sure that I'm far enough away that my lens will cover all of the range that I need. So now it's all in focus. You can see that it's aligned it, and there's some white areas here on the side. I'm not going to worry about that. The next thing I want to do is I want to come up to edit, and then right here, auto blend. Now, you don't want to choose panorama because obviously this isn't a panorama. So you want to choose stacked image, and then it really doesn't matter if you have these selected or not. I just leave them selected because we're going to crop out that area anyway. So by choosing stack images, what that does is it finds all the sharpest points of the image and it puts them together. And if there's not sharp points, it'll still put it together, and then you have blurry sections. So it's not going to fill it in for you.
Typically, how many shots do you take when you photo stack?
So for a scene like this, probably 15. Yeah. It really depends on what you're going for. If you're like, let's say you're downtown Denver and you are shooting at, let's say you're shooting at like 100 millimeters, but you're shooting buildings, and you got like, let's say you got 3 buildings and they're each behind each other. You might shoot one for one building, one for the other building, and then one for the next building, and that might be enough. But so it kind of depends on the elements that are in your image.
One question, do you use live view for your focusing? How do you determine how far to focus into the image? I think you kind of.
Yeah, so I do use live view because a lot of the times I'll do the touch screen, and I just want to make sure that I'm capturing all the images that I need for front to back and side to side focus. So I'm focusing down here on these rocks. I'm focusing all the way up through the middle. I'm focusing all the way over here on the sides. And then I focus a couple here on the rock, and then another one all the way on the top for the tree. So now this has been focus stacked. So what we can do, and then these over here are the masks, and you can see how they change. I don't really worry too much about that because I'm going to flatten the image anyway.
And on those masks there, it's showing which portion of that image is being used.
Right.
Right. So,
Yep, that's correct. Let's see if I do this. I'll take out. Let's see. Yes, I'm not going to be able to show it here, but let's see. Oh. So this is what a typical mask would look like. And then that's that mask. And then you just keep going until it puts it all together. So what I'm going to do is enable all these real fast. Okay. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to flatten this image. And I'm going to make sure that I deselect. It has some little dancing, marching ants here. I'm going to deselect those because I don't need those. And then I'm going to zoom in. And you can see how detailed this is. Like focus stacking is no joke for landscape photography. If you're not using it, I highly recommend that you at least give it a try and just see what you think. But I think you'll be blown away at the potential that you have. But there is some issues here. So you can see how this is not in focus because it's past the limitation of the camera itself. So for that, what I just do, and that's why I always shoot to leave enough room because I know that I'm going to crop. So then what I can just do is I can just bring this in. The sky, you really don't, there's probably nothing in the sky that's you would be able to tell is blurry, but just to make it a decent aspect ratio. And then just crop up above that. And now you got your image that's tack sharp, front to back, side to side.
So what does it do to the water? Obviously, moving waves and stuff.
Good question. That's where we're going with this next, Terry. So if we look over here, now you can tell that water doesn't line up, right? So what do? So there's a reason why I'm using this as an example. And I'm actually going to uncrop it for now so that we have the entire image to work with. But anyway, what you do is you probably want to find the image where you focused on the rock. So we're going to go back here to our raw files. And I was going to write down which image it was so that I could do this fast, but so I'm going to find the image real fast. Yeah.
Modify it on the merge images?
You can, but because those masks aren't super precise, I just want to find the one image that has the good water and then blend it in. It's way easier. Okay, so this one here looks pretty good, so I'm going to use it. And I am going to open it up. And everything is the same because I haven't made any adjustments yet. So I'm just going to click open. And then what I want to do is I want to select all, copy. For those of you that love keyboard shortcuts, I'm sorry, this is probably killing you because I'm not a keyboard shortcut guy. So I apologize. And then what I want to do is I want to paste it onto this one. Okay. Now you notice that when I did that, it's not aligned up. So what are we going to do? That's right. We're going to auto align. I'm going to unlock this bottom image. Going to select both images, and we are going to auto align and click OK. All right, so now we zoom in, and now we're aligned. So here's the bad water, not like Death Valley bad water, but bad water. And then here's the good water. So you can see that this is there's no weird lines or anything in it. So now all we do is I want to put the bad one up on top so that I can just simply take my black brush and at 100% opacity, just blend in this water right here. And that's all there is to it. And then you're going to flatten it, crop it, and if anybody does find a lens that has 0 focus breathing, let me know and I'll buy it tomorrow. And then you have a tack sharp image front to back, side to side. And you can even print this beyond the limitations of what most printers will tell you you can print, just because it has the additional sharpness. So that's how we focus stack. So when we get to the focus stack, night stack blending, I'm not going to do the focus stacking part because we went over that. So now you can see, and I didn't realize it, but check this out. I didn't realize this till yesterday. There's a bird up in this tree. Like, I literally didn't know that until I was just playing around with these files. I'm like, there's a bird up there. Kind of crazy. Okay, so that's focus stacking in a nutshell. Yeah.
So you combine all the images and done the focus stacking, so it's tack sharp front
Yep.
to back. When you're preparing a print file, do you still sharpen this file?
I do, just not as much. Yep. Great question. Okay, so that's focus stacking. We are going to go to stacking night sky images now.
And when you, because when I'm noticing when you're cropping, you're not using a specific aspect ratio, you're cropping.
I'm just getting rid of the bad stuff on the sides.
Right, so when you go to print, are you limited to, do you have to recrop whatever
No.
based on
I
printed limitations?
It's funny. I literally just about got in a, like, if we weren't texting, it would have been like a fist fight with a friend of mine. Not really, but that's kind of the level we were at, because he's like, I got to have this image. It has to be 8:10 aspect ratio. And I'm like, doesn't your lab, like, whatever file you give them, they're going to print it at that size? His deal was he wanted to make sure that whoever bought his image could just easily put it into a frame, like go to Michael's or someplace and buy a frame for it. I like to take that stress out of my life. I crop it, I can put it up on my website, and they will print it at whatever size is available based on the file dimensions I give them. So it may not be an 8:10, it may be a 16:22.5. That's what you're going to get. You want it framed, you know, just order the frame for it right then and there, and they'll do it. I just, that's way too much for me to live by, to have that specific, because we're always cropping and we're always, you know, we don't just take the perfect image to start with. So, you know, if I can get it to be a close aspect ratio, I do, but it's something I've never lost sleep over. Yeah.
On that topic, because I'm fairly new to printing.
Sure.
And I wouldn't say that far off from photography, but so with my clients, I do pet photography,
Mhm.
and I'm always paying attention to the aspect ratios, so that I am getting. I do most of my own printing, except for, you know, I can't go over 13:19. It's limitation on my printer. Luckily, I haven't had an order for that yet. But what you're saying is your crop is your crop, and so you don't crop down to a particular aspect ratio. Or are you shooting in a particular aspect ratio all the time and that's what you get?
I shoot it full frame.
Yep.
So whatever that is, depending on the camera, I process it, I edit it, I crop out anything, that maybe
Whatever ratio that is.
whatever you end up with is what I get.
Okay.
But you should be excited if somebody orders a print that's more than 13 by 19,
Yeah.
because that's how you're gonna find other labs that are gonna print your work. You're gonna find the ones that work best for you. And have you ever had a client tell you, I'm not gonna buy this image because it doesn't fit an 8 by 10 frame? Not yet.
I've had to do, if I haven't given enough room, I've had to auto-generate some pause.
So do what?
Do generative fill pause, because I just cropped too close.
Oh,
And then
yeah.
I had to go back and add fingernails and the client never noticed.
Right.
That's like, never even noticed, actually,
I know, right?
Layla's pause or Frank's pause.
when I'm shooting, and I learned this a long time ago from when I started doing canvas prints, because years ago, canvas prints were the print and then partial print wrapped around the sides.
Yeah.
So if you framed your image perfectly that you wanted, and then you went to put it on a canvas, you lost the sides. Now we can do mirrored sides and all these other stuff, so it's not as bad. But that's when I realized that you always need to shoot and allow yourself enough room on the edges for any type of editing, whether it be cropping or just, there's a lot of times I'll get home and I'll see something on the side of the frame that I didn't notice when I was shooting that needs to be gone. And now I can either do, the remove tool or all that kind of stuff, or I can just crop it out, whatever's easiest. And no, I absolutely do not worry about the ratios. I mean, I try to keep them somewhat standard. I'm not going to print a 6 by 84 image, I mean, I have some of those, but those are panoramas, but I try to keep them within general range.
My problem is because I do a lot of social media stuff, I'm forced to those limitations, which is causing me to crop a certain way.
Put
a border around it.
Canvas size and put a black
Yeah.
on it, and then cut that image up.
Okay. Great question. And let me get through this and then I'll be happy to answer some more. So we're going to do Starry Landscape Stacker now, and I'm going to show you guys how to put together stacked images for the night sky with how to stack those together. So the first thing I'm going to do is, I'm not going to show you guys this, but I generally convert all of my images before I stack them to either JPEGs or TIFFs. Now the program will accept raw files, but you don't necessarily know what you're getting when you put the raw files in. So through the image conversion between raw and either JPEG or TIFF, I can make slight adjustments to my images so that I can make sure that the color temperature is what I want. I can make sure that the contrast is a little bit lower for the best results, things like that. I do that first, and then those are applied to the JPEGs or the TIFFs, which I then stack. But I only do minimal work to that, because ideally what I want to do is I want to take the best stacked image and start working on that one. I don't want to work on all the bad images and then stack them together. I want to stack all the bad ones together to get one good one, and then I'll take that one good one and I'll start working on it. So Starry Landscape Stacker is very easy. Just open it up, and it's going to ask you where are the files that you want to stack, and they are in this file right here, Crest House Stack, JPEGs. And then I'm going to select all of these. I'm not going to select this first one because it is the one that is already stacked. And I'm going to open it. And then what it's going to do is it's going to read the images. It's going to make a note of where the stars are, where the land is. It's going to put them all together. We're going to come up with it's going to come up with a mask, and it's going to put on some red dots where it says, hey, there's stars here. This is where I think the sky is. And it does a really good job of that. And so it does a great job of identifying where the sky is as opposed to where the foreground is. And that's a huge benefit. And then what it's going to do is you're going to get an image that looks like star trails, but then you're going to align the images and it's going to align back to the middle image. So if you got 20 images, it's going to align to number 10 or 11 or whatever. And then all the stars will be pinpoint again, but it applies the noise reduction to the entire image. So it's quite for $35, it's well worth the cost. So it's looking at 41 images here, and now you can see that it looks like star trails. A little bit harder to see up there, but I don't know why this is so small. Let me make it bigger. There we go. So now it looks like star trails. And what I'm going to do is, so right here, start with automatic dots. And now it shows all the dots in the sky where it thinks that the sky is. I'm going to say that's okay. What I generally like to do is I like to make kind of click and drag around the edges just to help it out a little bit. And then get right in here in this doorway. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and click Find Sky. It's going to find the sky based on where the dots are. About this. But anyway, so here's the mask, and I'm going to go ahead and click Align and Composite because I'm curious to see what it's going to do now. But basically what it's doing is it's aligning all the images back to the center image in the sky where the blue is, and then it's going to apply the noise reduction to the entire image. And basically what it's doing is it's using a median noise reduction blend mode, so to speak. Now I'm glad I have one that's already put together.
Both programs work the same way.
They both work the same way, but they have different user interfaces. So the big one on Sequator is that there's a box that you have to check that says freeze foreground. If you don't freeze the foreground, it'll blend that together. There'll be motion in that. So you have to make sure that that's checked as well.
The sky or paint the foreground, which one you want to work with.
Okay.
Sky and has starry stack, landscape stacker, do that. And then if you have a lighter, foreground that you took during the day, then blend it, or do you put it in with starry, landscape stacker?
No, so Starry Landscape Stacker, that's a good question. Starry Landscape Stacker only combines and aligns the stars. So it's stacking the night sky to reduce the noise. And so what you're talking about, we're actually going to do next. And that's where I'm going to take my foreground shot and I'm going to put that with my night sky shot. But it's not done in Starry Landscape Stacker. It's already selected. That's already done. And I'm just going to select another one. And I'm going to open these into Photoshop layers. And this, I'm going to show you guys the difference. And then we're going to do the last one. I did. It just takes a little bit. Okay, so here is the image without the noise reduction. And then that's 41 images stacked. And that's probably a bare minimum of what I would do. I generally shoot more images to get better noise reduction, but you can clearly see the difference and the benefit that that has. And if you think 10-second exposures and you think 40 images, that's 400 minutes. So that's what, or 400 seconds. That's what, 7 minutes? You can stand outside or sit in your car for 7 minutes and play a game on your phone, right? I mean, and the benefit of this image is well worth that time. Okay, so that's the stacking part of it. Now we're going to do the focus stacked foreground, the stacked sky, and we're going to put those together. And we're right on time. Okay. So this is my focus stacked foreground that I've already done. And I'm just going to open that into Photoshop. And we can see that it is pretty sharp all the way through. All right, so this is our focus stack foreground. We got this nice area of the sky. Chuck and I waited until the Milky Way got over Long's Peak. We were in a slightly different position. We shot the Milky Way, and then we blend the two together. And that's what we're going to do here. So first things first, we need to mask out the sky. So how do we do that? Well, you can tell that the sky kind of blends into the mountains here. So making a mask on this is going to be fairly difficult. So what do? We make a duplicate layer, unlock the bottom layer. I just do that, you don't have to. And then what I like to do is I like to make a curves adjustment to the background layer. And you can either do that down here with your curves adjustment layers, or you can just go up here to adjustments and curves. And the idea behind this is that you want to make your foreground really dark and your sky really bright, because that helps the mask figure out where things are. I'm going to move this over. There we go. So I'm going to make the foreground dark. I'm going to make the sky brighter. And then I'm just going to go ahead and click OK. It's not going to make a perfect mask. We're going to have to do just a little bit of work, but this helps. With our lasso tool. No. Where? Oh, here we go. Quick select tool. That's what I want. Okay. With my quick select tool, and I always choose, you can see my cursor up here at the top. It's hard to see, but I always choose the middle one with the plus. And I'm going to change these to hardness of 0, spacing down to 0, and size 30 is good. Okay, then I'm just going to come over here and I'm going to select. Yeah, I'm going to select in the. There we go. So I'm making a selection for the sky. Now, I need to zoom in because you can see here that it's also selected some of the snow here. So now I'm going to use the same tool, and I'm going to use the minus, and then I'm just going to kind of come up here, and I'm going to get this close. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it has to be close. Okay, and that looks close enough for what we're doing. And I'm going to go to select and mask. I like to have mine on red so I can see what's going on. I am going to make this smaller. Okay. And then what I'm going to do is I am going to use the second one from the top, which is the refine edge tool. I'm going to choose plus. I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. And the idea behind this, and I'm going to make this hardness 0. So the idea behind this is I just want to go around the edges, and I want to fill in, well, it's going to fill in any spot that I might have missed. And I actually have this backwards because on my desktop, the sky would be red. But that's neither here nor there. Okay, that's done. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to click OK. And obviously it selected a couple of other things that I'm not happy with. So I'm going to just real quick deselect these. I don't want the white snow selected, because then the sky is going to show through where the snow is, and that doesn't work very well. Okay, good enough for that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this layer. I'm going to go delete it because we don't need it anymore. And then the sky is still selected. And because I have this layer unlocked, I can just hit the delete key. And now it deletes the sky. So now we're going to put the foreground, or we're going to put the new sky in. So we're just going to open this. And I don't need to make any adjustments to it. And then select all, copy, paste. And then move the foreground up to the top. And now it's pretty easy to see where this mountain looks horrible. And this is how you can tell where people do copy and paste work. It's ridiculous. We're going to fix that. First thing we want to do is we want to get the Milky Way in the right position, because obviously it's not. So Control T, free transform, bring this up a little bit. That looks good. Okay, now we want to click back on the foreground layer. And now what we're going to do is we're going to darken this mountain. So we're just going to use our burn tool. And we are going to make a fairly bigger brush at a low opacity. And we are just going to brush in here. And this isn't perfect yet. That's okay. It's better. And so what we're going to do now is this is where we separate, so to speak, the men from the boys with blending. We are going to create a new layer. We are going to put it in the middle between the two. We are then going to use our brush. And the idea behind this is we're going to create a light layer. So think of, if you're at Rocky Mountain National Park and you're looking over towards Long's Peak, you probably see the lights of Estes Park or Golden or someplace like that in behind the mountain. So we need to recreate those lights to give the image depth. So what we're going to do is, with our brush tool selected and generally fairly big, around the 200, 300 mark, it doesn't really matter. We want to select a color that is on the warmer side. So anything in here, doesn't matter. You do not have to be specific about this. Make sure your opacity on this is 100%, and then you just click anywhere, it doesn't matter. And then you're going to bring this down. The idea is to do this 4 times. So whatever you start at, just try to do it by 25%. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then you're going to lower the brush size by 25%. And then the idea here is that you're going to go from wherever you started directly up towards the white. So if you're going to adjust your brush size 4 times, you're going to adjust this light 4 times. So we're going to do this, and then we're just going to click right here. And what this does is this is going to give nice smooth gradient to the light that we're going to create. So adjust the brush size, adjust the density of the light. And I know some of you are following me because you've seen me do this before, and I know some of you are like, this guy's a nutcase. But anyway, you'll see. Okay, so I have these. I'm going to make this image smaller with the layer that I just created. I'm going to Control T, free transform. And I'm going to tuck this light layer right in behind here. So now it looks like a cut and paste job. And now we're starting to get a little bit of depth to the image. And you do not have to be precise on this. The idea is that it just looks natural, and it gives depth to the image. So this looks like too much. On my screen, it looks like too much. It actually doesn't look horrible up there. But what I like to do now is I change my blend mode from normal all the way down to luminosity. And then I bring my opacity down to somewhere like this. And now when we toggle on and off, it gives it just enough depth that it makes it look realistic. It doesn't look like a cut and paste job. But if you still feel like it looks like a cut and paste job, you can always go back in and darken this mountain just a little bit more, because we're still working on individual layers. So whatever I do here is not going to affect the sky or the layer that I just created. So just for kicks, I'm going to darken this just a little bit more with the burn tool at a low opacity. And I'm just going to go right over this. Just like that. And so now it looks much more realistic. It actually looks like it was shot at night. And then from here, I would either start my processing on this image, or if I wanted to make a little bit of an adjustment to the sky, because it's its own image, I can do that. generally what I'll do is I'll put a curves layer on it. And it's going to bring up this curves right here. And then what I do is I just hold the Option key down and wait till I see the little arrow that points down. It's hard to see there, but there's an arrow that points down. And I click on it, and that provides a clipping mask. So that means that this curves adjustment is only going to apply to the sky. So now I can do whatever I want to the sky, and it's only going to adjust the sky. So let's say I want to darken it up a little bit and maybe add just a little bit of contrast, maybe something like that. I can do that. And if I wanted to do something to the foreground, this is a good example of why the clipping mask is important. Select the foreground. And then for this one, I'm going to put a color. I'm just going to do color. Now, if I adjust this, I don't have a clipping mask on there. So it's going to apply this adjustment to everything that's underneath it. But watch what happens when I put the clipping mask on it. So I bring my cursor down here right by the scales. I hit the Option key. I pull it down just a little bit more until I see that the arrow. And I click it, and that provides the clipping mask. And now it only applies the adjustment to the layer directly below it. So now you can see the sky doesn't change, but the foreground does. So because that adjustment layer is clipped to that layer that's directly below it. But what I would honestly do on this is I wouldn't change the color. The color's good, but I do want to change the density a little bit. So again, I'm going to put a curves adjustment on it. Same thing. Option, wait till you see the little arrow. I need to bring this down. There we go. And then now we can do whatever we want to the foreground, and it doesn't affect the sky. So generally, I like to have it just a little bit darker because we want the images to look like they were shot at night. We don't want them black, though, because we want the viewer to be able to understand what they're looking at. So I might bring up the highlights just a little bit, and I might darken so then that's pretty dark up there. So I'm actually going to leave it like it is because it looks better like that up there than on my screen. But so that's how we put together a stacked foreground that we shot at blue hour, sunrise, sunset, or an overcast day. We mask out the sky, remove the sky, put the new sky in. And if you went with me on this day next year, I could show you this exact scene.
Once you sit in your car for 7 minutes and get your good Milky Way shot, why would you ever shoot it again? It doesn't change, does it?
Well, no, oh yeah, it does. So, well, so angle has a lot to do with how you're going to place the image in the sky. If, for one thing, the Milky Way doesn't come over Long's Peak like this, except for a certain time of the year. So, if Chuck knew that, so if I put my Milky Way like this, so because we're on separate layers, if I put my Milky Way like this, that's not right. People are going to know. The Milky Way is in certain positions each different times of the year, and based on your location on the planet, it's in different positions. And in 2019, Jupiter was in the middle of the Dark Horse Nebula. So if I take a sky from 2019 and I try to pawn it off as something I shot last week, I damn well better remove Jupiter from the Dark Horse Nebula, because everybody knows that Jupiter was in the Dark Horse Nebula in 2019 for the whole year.
Yeah, I knew that.
Anybody that went out and shot it knows that. Some people do. Some people like to buy night images based on things like the day they were married, the place they were married, their anniversaries, birthdays. What do you have a sunset image or a Milky Way image from the day that my daughter was born? Things like that. Some people do, other people don't. It depends on what it's used for. If it's going to be hung in an office, in a bank, in a boardroom, nobody cares. I care, and I'm not gonna put a 2019 Milky Way in an image I told you that I shot last week. But now here's what I could do. Check this out. So now you get people like this. And they're like, oh, well, I was in Chile last week in the Southern Hemisphere. And Chuck's like, well, that's funny. That looks like Long's Peak in Rocky Mountain National Park. So how the hell does that happen? Trust me, we've seen it all. I mean, literally, night photographers have seen probably the most falsification of images of anybody. Because in the Southern Hemisphere, this is what it looks like. It is upside down. You know, this is like, that's what it looks like. But anybody that lives in Colorado or anywhere in the Northern Hemisphere knows that it doesn't look like that. It looks just like that. And there's only certain times of the year that the Milky Way is over Long's Peak. There's a shot from the Dream Lake Trail in Rocky Mountain National Park that you can only get, I like to say, roughly 7 to 10 days out of the year based on moon phases, your work schedule, and the weather. And let me tell you, most of the time it's freezing cold up there when you have to go get it, but it's worth it, you know. And then you'll see other people post pictures with the Milky Way in the springtime up there over it, and it's like, no, that's the wrong time of year, or late in the summertime. But so does anybody have any questions? That's the presentation. And if anybody has any questions about anything that I talked about tonight or anything about photography, feel free to email me. I'm happy to help. Don't sit at home and be like, God, he was talking about this. What the hell was he talking about? Just email me. I'll be happy to respond as soon as I can.
Within 3 to 6 weeks.
Yeah. No, it does. If it takes me that long, then I died. I'm very good at responding to people.
Again, thank you, Darren, for the presentation tonight. There was a question out on the chat as to whether or not this was being recorded. We did record it. It'll be available in about a week or so. And for Lone Tree Photography Club members, there's a certain code. Do they have password protected in that? But we can provide that to you. But my guess is this will be one that will be watched quite a few more times. There will be a lot of replays for this one, just because so much great content in that. So again, a lot of good positive comments coming in. Thank you, Darren. Great presentation and that. So,
yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for having me.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I would suggest making your font
In the PowerPoint slide a lot bigger.
Yeah, I apologize for that. It was bigger in the original. This is an older version of Keynote. And so I didn't realize that, but I saw it when I was up there. But it'll be recorded, and if you guys want to copy out, I'm happy to give you a copy. I mean, there's no secrets here. So halos. I don't know.
We're losing people online.
That's fine.
This is a side picture, you're not seeing.
Hey, I'll send it to you. I have a video on it. I have one already made, and you may have it already if you have the link from the workshops. There's a Halo video. Yeah. I don't have any examples on the computer. Yeah. Thanks everybody for coming out. I appreciate it.